All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns. I'm really happy to be here with you today, and I'm happy to share some thoughts, some information, some practices, and just some general ideas and some general compassion with you that can help you to kind of navigate some of the, reactivity that you might be feeling and to really just, live a life that is, as I'm coming to say more and more often, that you're happy for no reason at all. And that's what I want for you, because that's what I have found in my own journey over the last few years. I used to be a very angry and reactive person, and I was always that far away from just losing my stuff, and now I can honestly tell you that I am sitting here and I just have a wellspring of happiness that arises within me. And I want so much, so badly, I yearn for you to feel the same thing that I'm feeling now. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad to be here with you to share some of these ideas and information and concepts and practices that I have developed over the last few years in my own journey of going from someone who is very, very angry all the time, very reactive, very high stress, very anxious, all kinds of stuff. I've gone from that all the way to the point where literally I sit here and I can't help but smile, and I feel this happiness well up within me, and it comes and it arises from the core of me. It's not something that I'm faking. It's not something that I have to maintain in any kind of way. I truly mean that it is happy for absolutely no reason. So thanks for joining me. So first of all, before we get into today's topic, I want to let you all know that I figured out what was going on with YouTube. If you've tried to get onto the videos in the last couple of days, you might have found that it was hard to do so. You might have found that when you got the email and clicked on the link, that YouTube said, "We're processing this video. Please check again later." Gave you this really black screen, not very fun, not very rewarding, right? Well, it turns out that in hooking up all these different microphone, and I tried a new camera the other day that didn't really seem worth it, and in all my sort of experimentation, apparently I clicked a setting in my QuickTime movie recorder here that went to maximum quality. I mean, it seemed natural to me. I was like, my audience deserves the maximum. I want them to have it. Well, apparently the maximum quality takes your file size from about 2 gigabytes to about 20 gigabytes. So that takes about almost like 16 hours or something like that to post a 30-minute video to YouTube. So I'm going to go back to the good quality, or the high quality that they call it. It's still good, okay? It's not low res or anything, and I feel like it's sufficient. So you all can let me know if you think that so if you look at the last 2 videos, right? So from today is the 3rd. So if you look at the videos from the 2nd and the 1st, those are at the maximum quality that you can get. If you feel that those are really worth it, then I'm happy to delay things. So let me know what you think, all right? But I think maybe it's better just to get the videos out so you can see them every day. I had one person the other day who told me how much she appreciated the fact that they come out early in the day, because those folks over in the East Coast, like right now, it's about 12:20 or 12:30 rather, that I'm recording this in the mountain time. So it's already 2:00 in the afternoon. So in order for you to get it within a reasonable time to actually watch it, to read it, to think about it, to maybe ask questions, I think that's probably worth it. But I'll defer to you. So if you feel like my vision was that much more beautiful when you saw the high resolution video, then let me know, and I'll figure it out. All right. So I hope that you can, I hope to hear from you on that pretty soon. So yesterday we were talking about the impact and the effect that we have on others, right? We talked about empathic resonance, right? And mirror neurons. I don't know if I went really into the science of mirror neurons, but mirror neurons are essentially these neurons in our brain that fire when we see someone else experiencing something. Okay, so they fire as though we are experiencing that same thing inside our own mind and our own body. And so we talked about how this impacts, like how when you walk into a room, it's never just neutral, right? You're either going to lift up the energy of the room or you're going to bring down the energy of the room, right? And that's based on this empathic resonance and these mirror neurons, because people can tell when you're not doing well. They can tell when your energy's not quite right. Maybe you're a little sad, maybe you're a little frustrated, maybe you're a little angry, and or maybe a lot angry. And people can recognize this even if you're not actively expressing it. Like if I walked into a room and I told you, hey, listen, I'm feeling very angry today, right? That's obvious. But if I walk into a room and you say, hey, how you doing? I say, fine. Right? And I don't say anything more, but inside I'm angry, you're going to feel that anger within me, and you're not going to really believe that I'm fine. and so yesterday we talked about that. And so today I want to talk about how we can kind of use that, this knowledge of this empathic resonance and these mirror neurons, and how we can kind of, intentionally and actively use this understanding and this reality, this physiological reality, to actually impact the others around us in a positive way. So, one of the things that happens in interpersonal relationships, right, is that, everybody's always going through something. You're either having a good day or you're having a bad day, or maybe you're just having a meh day, right? But something is happening within you, right? And on top of that, something that's happening in you right now, right? Whether, again, you're having, maybe you're feeling happy today, or maybe you're feeling frustrated today, maybe you're feeling anger today, whatever that thing is that's happening to you, that is as a result of your outside circumstances. Yeah, like this thing happened to you earlier today that somebody cut you off on the road, and you're angry about that. Right? And so that anger is something that you're experiencing, right? At any given moment, you're experiencing some emotion that's happening in you, right? And again, these are oftentimes triggered by the external circumstances that we're living with, that we're experiencing, right? And so the idea then is that, not only is it that people are going through. But as you remember, last week we spent a lot of time talking about the different kind of patterns and the different kind of, sort of tendencies that we have, which are really, they're based on, things that are completely out of our control. So, for instance, myself, right? And I can only speak for myself because I'm the one that knows me the best, and I know me better than I know anybody else, right? And so, when I was young, my family had a lot of anger, okay? But it wasn't just my parents. It was also my grandparents had a lot of anger in them. And then I saw it in my uncles and aunts, because they grew up under that same anger umbrella as my parents did. And that kind of, all trickles down into me. And so in that way, I grew up in those first, 7 years of life that they call the really formative years psychologically, right? That's those first 7 years of your life is when you're soaking up all of this information, right? You're soaking up everything you can see, everything you can hear, everything you can taste and touch, and you're seeing people interact with each other, and you're seeing people interact with you, and you're kind of forming your worldview during these years of what is acceptable, right? Like, what's an acceptable way to talk to people? What's an acceptable way to respond to people? Or what's an appropriate way to react to situations, right? And that's where your reactivity is formed, is those years. Right? Because, again, coming from a family where there was a lot of anger, right? The reaction of, yelling was always very logical to me, right? Not that it was logical, not that I agree with that now that I know better, but at the time when I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, when I saw, my mother yelling at me, or I saw her yelling at others, or I saw, it was always like that reaction of anger was normal, that was appropriate. The most important person in my life, right? The person who I was learning everything from, that's the way she did things. And so therefore, that's the way I did things. And again, this starts as an innate, implicit kind of pattern that we're going through, but then it becomes reinforced because when we operate from that pattern, when our very logic system tells us that anger is an appropriate reaction, well, then what we do is we react that way all the time, and basically, on a daily level, right? We're finding ways to react to, in a way of anger, and that is basically practice. Right? So what that means is that every time we react in anger, we're reinforcing that way of reacting. And so it becomes more and more automatic, and it becomes more and more really who we are. Right? It becomes a part of our personality, a part of this identity that we have in this world. Right? And of course, this affects now everything that we do in this world has a lot to do with not just what's happening in us, but also how we're relating to those around us. This is a very, very important core concept of what it means to be a human being is relational. In fact, the mind itself, a lot of times I was listening to a talk by one of my favorite human beings in the world, Dr. Dan Siegel, this morning, and he was talking about this, how, a lot of times we feel as though the mind, right, is something that just happens inside our body, right, which is similar to what I'm talking about here, right, that the emotions are something that we feel like happens just within our body. But the reality is that our mind is shaped partially by our internal experiences, yes, but equally by the relationships that we're having with others, like the pattern formation that we talked about a few minutes ago, right? That is the way that your mind is shaped, right? Your very identity, the very way that you process the world around you, okay, is not just shaped by something internal. It's shaped very, very much by this interplay of relationship that we have with everyone else. And it doesn't stop when we're 9 years or 7 years old or whatever it is. It keeps going. And the reason, and it's going to keep going in the direction in which it is instinctive for us. So that brings me back to this sense of practice, right? So when my parents were always reacting with anger, and I learned in my first 7 years or so of my life that was the appropriate way to react to things, well, then for the rest of my life, until a few years ago when I really figured out how to kind of repair this and to change this about myself, we get to a point where we're constantly, because we feel that anger becomes like the baseline of our existence in a way. And so then, we're reacting constantly with that anger. So, somebody, cuts you off on the road. Somebody, you go into the store and cutting off on the road is an easy one. But let's say even going into the store and seeing that there's none of the particular bread that I like to buy for myself and my family, right? There's none on the shelf, So instead of, for me, instead of feeling disappointment maybe, or instead of feeling something along the lines of something that requires acceptance to just get past, right? No, I would take it right to the point, like whose fault is it that this happened? Who can I blame for this? Right? That's where my thought went. And that's what I mean by the practice, right? So every time I had the opportunity, I employed anger. And that becomes, again, you do it more and more and more, often and often and often, over and over and over. Well, what happens is it becomes something that is the natural inclination of your mind. which again includes the relating of, of everybody else. And so then you realize that you're only relating to other people who also have this same level of anger, right? It gets to the point where it's like those are the people who are attracted, that you are attracted to, and those people are attracted to you because you're meeting in this place of the anger, right? Which is really just a place of trauma. Right? It arises from a place of trauma, a place of great suffering. And so my thoughts today, and what I wanted to share with you today is the concept that, when we walk into a room, just like we were talking about yesterday, that we do have an impact on others. And others are going to key into what's going on inside of us. So, and that's what I just said, right? Is that myself, as somebody who is always pretty angry, right? People could sense that anger in me. And those people who were not also angry, they would be repelled by me. Those people didn't want anything to do with me. They were stepping away, right? But the people who were also angry, well, they were coming and let me talk to you. Let's have a conversation here because I feel you. There's something that we're connecting with here. But of course, it was something that's extremely negative and extremely harmful to ourselves and to everybody else. But what happens then is that, that's the kind of bonds that we're forming. Yeah. And so the idea today that I want to talk about is to actively and intentionally use this understanding that we are impacting others. We are, we're attracting people who have the similar kind of issues to us. We're attracting them towards us, and we're repelling people who might, contradict that and kind of show us why maybe that's not the way to go, right? So we keep ourselves in this, cocoon, if you will, of our own sort of, traumatic driven, emotional reaction. Right. And whether that's anger, or it could also be depression. It could also be sadness. It could also be jealousy. It could be and sometimes these things cross over, of course. Anger and jealousy go very close together. I can tell you plenty of stories that when, the person who is now my wife, if she was out with her friends, I would literally be crawling the walls, thinking that she was like, making out with some guy in a bar in New York, and I would drive myself to the point of insanity where I would be, calling, every like 15 minutes just to make sure, and this was all driven by the same thing, right? And so what I really needed in my life, and in my day-to-day experiences, what I really needed was I needed somebody to connect with me, right, on a level that was not anger. I needed somebody to show me something that was the opposite of anger, right? Because I was feeling such pain from the anger that if I had somebody who expressed something like kindness to me, it always blew me away. It was like, now, I'll be honest with you, in the time when I was really at the height of this, anger turmoil that I was experiencing, I didn't trust people who were kind to me, and that's a different issue. We'll talk about that another time, but you can't worry about that, right? We can't worry about whether somebody is trusting us. We can't worry about, whether they're going to accept what we're saying and they're going to accept our kindness and our compassion. But the point is that you never know what someone is going through. And again, this is things that people are going through on a life circumstance level. Yeah, like did you have a rough morning today? Did somebody cut you off on the road today? Did you go to the coffee shop and they gave you, there was salt instead of sugar that you put into your coffee? What happened to you, right? Like something might have happened this morning, or today, or last week, or this month, or maybe 5 years ago that you still haven't healed from. Right? But there's things that are happening to us all the time. And when we as people in this world, right, as people who are connected to everyone else in this world, right? Because this kind of brings up, and I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but this kind of brings up the concept of the self, right? Or self versus other. And in a lot of ways, when we train compassion, that's one of the things, and also mindfulness, one of the things that starts to fall away a little bit is this concept of other and self, right? Or self versus other, as I said a minute ago. That in fact, we are all very much connected to one another. And that is shown again in these mirror neurons and this empathic resonance that we all share with each other. It is measurable, scientifically shown and measurable, this connection that we have. So the idea then that I want to share with you today and hope to inspire you to maybe set this intention and practice this a little bit, right? Is to always be kind to others. Because you never know what someone is going through. And while it's not your fault and it's never, it's never our burden how someone else reacts to something that we do emotionally. Right? That happens within them, right? Even though I could say something like, I could say, hey, you're a poopy head, right? And that might hurt you in a way, right? So I am causing some kind of, emotional reaction in you directly, right? But really, the emotions that you're really going to feel as I say you're a poopy head, right, are really associated with all the different things in your life that have happened that remind you that come up when you hear that word poopy head. Right? And obviously I don't call people poopy head, but I think it's kind of funny because I have 2 kids. And anyway, so the idea is that I'm not responsible for your emotional reaction, whether or not, even if I'm not deliberately and directly calling you a poopy head, right? Like if I do something, like if I take the last loaf of bread off of the shelf and you have a negative emotional reaction to it, well, then that's not my fault. That's something that's happening within you, right? But just because I'm not at fault doesn't mean that I can't hope and even work towards the relief of the suffering that you're feeling when you look at the shelf and you see that there's no bread there. Okay, now this is not an exercise to prowl the grocery store aisles and just make sure everybody feels good about what they're not able to get, but that's just an example. And the idea then is that in any circumstance, any time that you are interacting with another person, holding in your awareness the vast and deep, circumstantial things that this person is dealing with. We have no idea what it is right now. So of course, some people are close to us and we do have an idea of what they're going through. But in a lot of cases, we have no idea, right? When you walk up to the grocery store, checkout line, hopefully with the bread that you want, when you walk up to that person at the cash register who's helping you to facilitate you getting this food and being able to go feed yourself and your family, right? When you walk up to that, there's a person there. Right? There's a person there who has the depth and the wealth and the vast amount of emotions and feelings and sensitivities and traumas and thoughts and hopes and desires and love and pain and suffering. Right? It's all in there. All of that. Every single person that you meet. In the same way that it's in you, right? Like, when you're having a rough day, right? Like, it's, this person cut me off or I couldn't get the bread I want or whatever it is, right? And again, that's on top of and is dictated by that same pattern that you had, right? So if this cashier that you're walking up to, if he or she has grown up in a family that was particularly angry, right, and something happened this morning, that triggered this person's anger, well, then they're in a place where they're not well right now, and it's not, it's not our place to judge whether their anger is valid or invalid. That we have nothing to do with that, because that, again, we don't know their circumstances. We don't know their daily circumstances, and we don't know their life circumstances. We don't know their upbringing circumstances. We don't know their generational circumstances. There's so much that we don't know about this. We don't know how much we don't know. Remember the beginner mind, right? And so when we're entering into these interactions with people, which, I mean, I invite you to, one day, keep count of how many people you interact with on a given day. Now, of course, in COVID times, it's less, right? But it's not zero. And I really would, I mean, I think it's a really great practice actually to kind of, keep a count one day, and at the end of the day, count up how many different people you had an interaction with. And an interaction can be, anything from, it can be like a cashier, a customer, it can be a deep and intimate talk with your spouse or with your children, or it could simply be making eye contact with somebody on a busy city street, right? Or somebody in another car as you're driving. Anyone you interact with, that means, interacting means like, I'm experiencing you, right? And that can be just as much as just eye contact with somebody. It can even be not eye contact, right? It could even be somebody who just passes you by. In a certain way, you are experiencing that person as well, and they are experiencing you on some level. And so the idea then is, if you like, you can certainly, kind of keep track and just for fun and to see how, how many people you actually interact with every day. I think it's pretty interesting, and you might find it interesting, you might not, and that's fine. But the point that I'm really driving towards today is that when we're interacting with these people, and it's a lot of people, it really is. I mean, there's tons of people every single day, even in COVID time, but certainly less in COVID time than not. And someday we're going to get back, right? Someday we're going to get back to just, kind of freely roaming around and not being worried about keeping 6 feet apart. But even in that keeping 6 feet apart from someone, you're experiencing that person. Right? Like just the fact that you are holding that space in between you, that is an interaction with that person. And so what I'm inviting you to do today is in each one, and I mean, now look, this is a practice, right? So we set the intention to do every single one, but we're not going to succeed on that the first time, right? So I'll get back into that. Let me first get into what I'm inviting you to practice today. I'm inviting you to practice being kind all the time. Right? And the basis for this is that, again, you don't know what each of the people who you're experiencing, you do not know what they have been through. You don't know what they've been through today, and you don't know what they've been through for their entire lives. You don't know intergenerationally what they've been through. And so the idea is, in my opinion, right, we kind of should assume the worst to a certain degree. We hope for the best, but we assume the worst, right? We hope that this person is happier than anybody else, and that this is just a beautiful, wonderful person who there couldn't be anything better about this person's life. Of course, we hope for that, right? But I think we can all agree that that's probably the exception to the rule. And so if the rule is that everyone that we're dealing with is going through some kind of struggle, or at least potentially going through some kind of immediate present struggle and suffering of which we have no idea, but we can make an assumption that that is happening. And the only reason we're making that assumption is because what we're going to do is we're going to be compassionate. Compassion is nothing more than the wish and sometimes the action for the relief of someone's suffering. So if we assume that there's something that people are suffering with, which again is a very accurate assumption, right? More, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be absolutely correct, right? And so if we make that assumption and we interact with people with that assumption or under that assumption, and we bring kindness into each interaction because we're hoping to relieve whatever this person is suffering through, well, then we're always going to be doing good. We're always going to be practicing generosity towards them. We're also going to be practicing presence. And really, both of these things are really, really beneficial for us. Okay? You see what I'm doing here? You see, it's not just for the person that's at the cash register, right? Or the person at the DMV counter, or the person at the, the police officer who pulls you over for a speeding ticket, right? It's not just those circumstances, right? But instead, it's every circumstance. So the Dalai Lama has a famous quote, and again, I am not a practicing Buddhist, and I'm not aspiring to be a Buddhist. I'm not teaching Buddhism, nothing like that. But the concepts and the practices of mindfulness and heartfulness are definitely rooted in Buddhism, and even before Buddhism. They really go into ancient Hinduism, even in ancient Egypt, and all that. So it's not just a Buddhist thing, but the Dalai Lama is someone who really believes in compassion. Actually, one of the reasons I'm not a practicing Buddhist and don't want to be a practicing Buddhist is because the Dalai Lama told me not to indirectly. I was reading a book by an author, who's a great author called John Perkins, who writes about global social justice and economic exploitation and stuff like that. It's not very uplifting reading, but it's very real and very recommended because he's really amazing. But anyway, he had a personal meeting with the Dalai Lama at one point, and he went to kneel in front of the Dalai Lama, and I guess I don't know if he's going to kiss his feet or something like that, and the Dalai Lama stopped him. And John Perkins said, well, I thought that's what Buddhists do, so I was just trying to honor your tradition. And the Dalai Lama told him, he says, don't become a Buddhist. He said, we have enough Buddhists in the world, but do practice compassion because the world needs more compassion. Right. That solidified so many things for me. And so I have no interest in becoming a Buddhist, right? But the Dalai Lama is also a great philosopher, and his philosophy is always rooted in kindness and compassion. And so one of his great quotes is whenever possible, be kind. And it is always possible. Right, because the basic, the real bottom line here, and I know we're getting into kind of a long video here, but the bottom line is that kindness is never out of place. There's never a time where being unkind is advantageous. And think about that for a minute, right? Like, even, no matter what the situation is, kindness is always appropriate. And we can have that conversation if you'd like to engage in that conversation and have a dialogue around that and share some thoughts, because it's not something that seems like, back in the day for me, I'd be like, what? Absolutely not. I can't be kind to everyone. If I'm kind to everyone, then I'm not me. Like, I need to be angry. I need to be, hurt people. Like, that's how I maneuver through this world. But guess what? That put me in a really, really bad spot. Really unhealthy, mentally, physically, emotionally. I was dealing with a lot of problems and major, major struggles. And in fact, physically, hey there, so sorry about that, but my video got cut off, and now I hope this works because I just actually crashed the whole program, and I had to get on the phone with Apple support and all that. So hopefully this is going to work now. But yeah, as I was saying there, that physically this all had such an impact on me, and I can honestly tell you that if it weren't for my learning the techniques to become more kind with others and to release some of this anger and some of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that came with the anger, well, I honestly don't think I would be here right now. Or if I were here, I would be here with a stent in my artery, because that's how unhealthy I was. And it was very much a physical manifestation, and it all came from this same place. And so what I'm offering you here is an opportunity to start practicing something that could literally not only change and help and impact the lives of those around you, but could also wind up saving your life. And that is not an overstatement. So the practice that I would invite you to start to do is to simply set an intention, okay, just to be kind. Just to bring kindness into every one of your interactions. Now, here's the thing. When you set this intention, right, you're not going to be perfect right away. Nobody is. And it's going to take practice. And so I'm going to invite you, while you're considering doing this practice, I want you to be patient with yourself. Okay. And the idea here is that, you will fall off, you will slip, you will forget about your intention, and you'll find yourself doing something that is not kind. And so in that moment that you find that you have done something that is not kind, it's very, very simple. Okay, don't give up on yourself. Don't get angry with yourself. Don't get frustrated, but simply just acknowledge the fact that you did something that was not kind. You were not operating from a place of kindness, and now just bring yourself back to the kindness. It's the same way that we develop mindfulness through practice, right? When we're practicing mindfulness, what we're doing is we're paying attention in the present moment. And when we realize that our mind has wandered off somewhere and is no longer in the present moment, whether this is in a formal meditation or an informal mindfulness practice, the task is to simply recognize that our mind has wandered and to bring it back. And if you do that over and over for a number of, a few weeks, it's going to become a habit, and you will be kind all the time. And that is going to benefit you in enormous ways. And I mean it, okay, physically as well as mentally as well as emotionally. And then you can be happy for no reason. All right, everybody. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for watching. I hope this video works, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.